The diamond industry is in chaos. Billions of dollars in diamonds are sitting in warehouses going unsold. De Beers, the infamous diamond monopoly, lost half of its revenue in just 1 year and is now up for sale. Social media is filled with desperate jewelers in panic. All this just because, in just the past 5 years or so, Chinese exports of lab-grown diamonds have reshaped the global industry. Over 70% of global lab-grown diamond jewelry comes from Chinese factories, and prices for synthetic diamonds are down 74% since 2020. For some parts of the industry, this is nothing short of the apocalypse. And if you've gone engagement ring shopping anytime recently, this is probably what you've heard. It's a just so story that just makes sense, but the problem is, it's wrong. Or at least it's only part of the story. If you decide to do what I did after hearing about this and look into the Chinese diamond industry or its history, you'll very quickly realize nobody has any idea what's going on. Points as basic as, when was the largest Chinese synthetic diamond company founded, will get you two different answers. Right now, something that so few people understand is rapidly reshaping things as basic as how we marry each other and things as major as the national politics of entire countries. And while I've only scratched the surface, I'm here today to sketch out some of the basic facts about this industry's origins and how it came to be. The Chinese synthetic diamond industry didn't just start 5 years ago. It didn't even start 46 years ago, when Deng Xiaoping opened up the Chinese economy. No, it has a much more interesting history, and started over 60 years ago, when the Sino-Soviet split ended a decade of socialist fraternity between China and the Soviet Union. You can find a million online articles saying Henan province, China is where most of the world's lab-grown diamonds are from, but not why Henan. Well, here's why. After the Chinese Communist Party won the civil war over the Kuomintang in 1949, the Soviet Union and China partnered in the immediate and urgent task of not only rebuilding the country after the destruction of the Chinese Civil War in World War II, but also attempting to build an advanced socialist economy to catch up to the capitalist West. The Soviet Union soon sent thousands of engineers to do one of the largest knowledge transfers in human history, to help China build an industrial base, and also exported advanced materials and products used in industrial production that China could not get from the advanced economies of the West. Industrial diamonds were one of those things. This may be a bit confusing if you don't know about the industrial uses of diamonds, but they're not just a shiny rock for a wedding ring. Because of their unique hardness, it makes them useful in all sorts of products. Grinding reels for sharpening certain metal cutting tools, saws for rock cutting, tool bits, powders, and more. Since China couldn't produce these things for themselves, the Maoist era economy fully relied on the Soviet Union. But this all changed in the Sino-Soviet split. After years of slow-growing animosity, the Soviet Union and China's relationship finally fractured in the late 50s and 60s over, among other things, who would lead the global communist movement. While that could be a video in itself, what matters is that the Soviet Union recalled all of its engineers in 1960 and withdrew from all trade with China, including industrial diamonds. This was devastating to the Chinese economy. However, Mao was ever the entrepreneur. In the aftermath, Mao started an economic self-reliance drive to develop within China all the capabilities they'd relied on the Soviet Union for, including diamonds. Following this, in 1958, the first Ministry of Machine Building established an institute in Henan's capital called Zhengzhou Research Institute for Abrasive and Grinding, to replace their dependencies on Soviet imports. But they didn't begin researching producing synthetic diamonds until 1960, when the ministry assembled a crack team of scientists and engineers for a top-secret mission called Project 121, led by Wang Guangzhou. You have to remember, at this time, synthetic diamonds were a very new thing. The world's first lab-grown diamond had only been produced a couple of years ago in 1953, and only 4 countries had by then produced their own. So, this top-secret team started from nothing. Wang said at the time they were, quote, completely clueless. It took over 32 failed laboratory experiments before, by 1963, Wang and his team had successfully produced synthetic diamonds in the lab, and less than 2 years later, produced a synthetic diamond press to make them at a truly industrial scale. But it doesn't just stop there. The institute didn't only bring the technology to China, they also spread it throughout the state-owned economy and laid the foundation for later industry. In the 1960s and 70s, the institute helped build the first synthetic diamond tool plants in China, notably the first, second, and sixth grinding wheel factories. As I'll discuss later, even into the 21st century, the state-owned sector of synthetic diamond production that the institute helped cultivate still leads the industry in production in China. The Maoist era influences in the diamond industry aren't just a thing of the past, but continue to live on and impact it every day. It's not just in the state-owned sector that the institute was massively important, but also in the literal origins of the private synthetic diamond industry. And it all started in a small Chile farming town called Zhicheng. When Chinese economic reforms kicked off in the 80s, it was a time to make some real money. Most articles will tell you here that Feng Jinzhang, an enterprising engineer at the institute, decided to strike out on his own and build a diamond powder factory in the sleepy hometown of Zhicheng, not far from the institute in Zhengzhou. They'll also say that the factory was the precursor for Zhicheng's later development into the diamond capital of China. This is all true, but only part of the story. There would be no synthetic diamond industry in Zhicheng without the institute or Feng, but this glosses over some key things. What nobody mentions is that Feng's factory didn't stick around very long, and already folded by 1985. Not only that, he didn't decide on his own to set it up. The local Zhicheng party committee invited him to come back home and open up a diamond factory business, and helped him facilitate the project. After the factory failed, it created a set of very special circumstances in Zhicheng. It left behind a group of highly skilled technical workers, trained in his factory, now without any work to do. They very quickly set up not factories, but home workshops for grinding diamonds into powder. The entire town was basically transformed into a workforce and a hub for at-home diamond processing. They didn't even make their own diamonds at first, and traveled around China buying synthetic diamonds for their family members at home to grind into powder. In the words of one worker-turned-businessman, Wang Jianxi, quote, "Wherever there was diamond production, the Zhicheng people were there buying raw materials. Wherever there was a diamond fair, the Zhicheng people were there promoting micropowder. They spent years braving frigid winters traveling to trade fairs in Beijing promoting their product. However, this cowboy era of industrial diamond production didn't really start to mature until the 90s and 2000s, when R&D into improving the output of synthetic diamond presses rapidly increased production in the industry. By the mid-late 2000s, China was already the #1 producer of industrial diamonds in the world. For context, in 2000, China was a distant second source of American imports of industrial diamonds, but by 2006 dwarfed the competition. It was so severe that in 2005, 6 of the only synthetic diamond producers in America filed a trade complaint to ban Chinese imports, which failed. So, more than a decade before the diamond jewelry industry collapsed, a literally identical story played out in industrial diamonds. Rapid increases in Chinese production of industrial diamonds created global prices and turned Henan province into the leader of the industry. The just so story I said at the start, where China randomly started making diamonds 5 years ago, not only ignores this story from 2 decades ago, but in many cases the same exact machines used to produce industrial diamonds that crashed prices are now the ones producing for jewelry and crashing natural diamond prices. Now, to tie things together a bit, it's clear that the Maoist era at least had a big impact on the start of the industry. During its time, the Institute brought the technology to China, dispersed it throughout the state-owned economy, and was where the founder of the industrial cluster in Zhicheng came from. But it ends there, right? It's not like there is a state-owned enterprise from the Maoist era that is the world's largest synthetic diamond producer and makes more money than the next 2 companies combined. Right. Well, most articles on the history of the Chinese industrial diamond industry focus on the cluster of factories in Zhicheng started by the entrepreneurs of the 80s and 90s. And for good reason. They had an enormous impact, and Zhicheng is still the synthetic diamond capital of the world. But there's also an elephant in the room that, for some reason, is rarely mentioned but publicly available. If you Google right now what the biggest synthetic diamond company in the world is, everything will tell you Zhongnan Diamond. It's huge, it's in Zhengzhou where the institute was, and dwarfs the competition. And technically, it was only founded in the early 2000s, so it couldn't be a Maoist era remnant, right? But if you decided that you wanted to invest in Zhongnan Diamond and tried to pull up its listing in the Chinese stock exchange, you wouldn't find it. Instead, you would discover it's a subsidiary of a company called Norinco. Okay, well, let's pull up Norinco's listing. When you go to pull that up, you'll quickly figure out what Norinco is short for. China North Industries Group Corporation. Yes, it's a subsidiary of China's largest defense corporation and a state-owned enterprise. Hundreds of thousands of newlyweds across the world are wearing diamond rings from a weapons manufacturer. What you have to understand is that when a state-owned enterprise in China is founded in a particular year, it's never actually founded that year. Pre-existing operations in a larger company are typically reorganized and split off into a subsidiary, usually for organizational reasons when they get too big. And the subsidiary is technically founded when that happens. Norinco was founded in 1980, but was really just a reorganization of the Maoist-era defense sector into a new marketized state-owned enterprise of the Dengist era. The same is true with Zhongnan Diamond. Part of the reason domestic production of synthetic diamonds after the Sino-Soviet split was so important was not just for economic purposes, but military too. In China, it's actually illegal for any company to sell or relocate their synthetic diamond machines abroad precisely because of its dual-use potential in both civilian and military applications. The Chinese military was itself involved in the research, development, and production of synthetic diamonds for its own purposes. When Zhongnan Diamond was founded, the already existing R&D and production base of Norinco was simply spun off into a subsidiary, and it not only was an industry leader in the technological drive that led to China's rise as a producer of industrial diamonds in the 2000s, but also in the latest round of R&D into creating cosmetic diamonds for jewelry at an industrial scale. You cannot tell the story of the recent crash in diamond prices without either Zhongnan Diamond or the industrial cluster in Zhejiang, and you can't tell the story of Zhongnan Diamond without the Maoist era history of its owner, Norinco, or the story of the Zhejiang cluster without the proto-cluster that came before it in the Zhengzhou Research Institute for Abrasive and Grinding. So, what does this all mean? Obviously, there's more to the history of synthetic diamond industry than just the state-owned economy that came before it. Decades of work by top scientists, skilled technicians, enterprising traders, and innumerable factory workers developed it step by step into what it is today. The title was meant to be controversial, but it's not just Mao and the Sino-Soviet split that are making your engagement rings cheap. However, as is common in most histories, all the enormous ways the Maoist era continued to influence the later boom in the Chinese economy and the foundation it laid is unmentioned. Scholarship and media find it easier to simply split China into the good parts made by Deng and the remnant leftover bad parts made by Mao. But we need to think deeper than that. The world historical rise of the Chinese economy is an event that cannot be split into simple good, bad, moralistic judgments or lazy histories. There are so many ways, as I explained the Zhongnan Diamond, the Maoist economy not only passively influences current China, but has literal still living institutions that can be directly traced to the past. Until next time, follow for more.